I plan to do a long, in-depth video essay on Lupin III and its history in both media that it draws from and media that it has impacted, so I'm not going to get in-depth on franchise history here. But if you're unfamiliar, Lupin III is a Japanese franchise centered around a thief, the grandson of Maurice LeBlanc's Arsène Lupin gentleman thief character, his little gang of thieves, gunman Jigen, swordsman Goemon, and femme fatale Fujiko, and Zenigata, the Interpol inspector that chases them. The franchise varies so much tonally and formally depending on what you're reading or watching. Lupin III and the Castle of Cagliostro, Miyazaki's first film, is this beautiful, warm, nostalgic movie where Lupin is sweet and heroic, and in the original manga, he's an insane, murderous rapist. I'm not exaggerating or being sensitive there. Monkey Punch was a freak, and everything else can kind of be placed on a spectrum in between those two. Like the average Lupin characterization is good-hearted and also horny. Lupin III the First is the new CGI Lupin movie, and the first, full-length CGI film in the franchise. I had been considering reviewing it anyway, and then G-Kids, the American distributor for the first, contacted me and offered me an advanced Blu-ray copy, so I was like, sure. I had tried to see the Atlanta drive-in screening of the dub, and I also bought the digital release of the dub within an hour of it coming out on Amazon, and I had already seen the movie multiple times in Japanese, so it's not like G-Kids influenced my decision to watch this movie. That was going to happen either way. I don't talk about physical media releases a lot on this channel, but this release looks fantastic, and as far as special features, the interview with director Takashi Yamazaki is really informative and interesting.
最初モーションキャプチャーでやろうかっていう話もあったんですよ。ただモーションキャプチャーだとやっぱりそのルパンらしい動きみたいなものが出てこないと思ったんで、すごいお金かかるんですけど、やっぱここは手付けアニメーションにさせてくださいっていう話をして、もう何を捨てても手付けアニメーションにするべきだっていう話をして。でも結局何も捨てずに全部作ったんですけど、結構予算管理は大変だったかなと思いますね。やっぱ手付けの全部のシーンを手付けでつけていくってすごくお金かかることなんで。
The Japanese voice actor interviews are kind of interesting, especially a lot of it is their perspective on the Lupin franchise, which I haven't really seen Kurita talk about before, so that was cool. The technical step-by-step CGI animation featurettes are fun to look at, I guess, but not very informative if you're looking for something concrete or educational. And the English voice actor Zoom call recording is entertaining, but it's awkward. Although I say that as someone who's been on plenty of awkward recorded or streamed Zoom calls as well, like panels and stuff. This movie's biggest strength, and the #1 reason to watch it, whether or not you're familiar with the franchise, is the character animation and the lively, subtle, playful characterization of the main cast. It is so impressive what Marza did translating these characters into CGI. I really love all the designs and little character moments and expressive gestures and moments of physical comedy that help solidify the characterization. Like Zenigata's hench cops all slamming into him from behind and him not moving an inch. Or Jigen draping his stick legs everywhere like he has since part 1. There's so much detail that sometimes it feels more like a live-action movie with each actor doing their own thing in the background. And so many little details, like Laetitia using her finger to help with solving a math problem in her head. And environmental details too, like all the cigarette butts in the Fiat and the grime on its windows. The people all feel so alive and the environment is so tangible. More than most animated movies I've seen, and probably more than any other CGI movie I've ever seen. The thing about Lupin media is that apart from a speech in Cagliostro and part 5 riffing on Cagliostro, dialogue is almost never important. Introspection happens sometimes, and it's cool when it does, but characters are defined by their actions more than anything else. Mamo and Part 4 explore the idea that Lupin doesn't dream.
It's the mental characteristic of either a complete idiot or a god!
He's so defined by being a thief and taking what he wants that anything he would want he goes after immediately. He's an impulsive hedonist, and everyone else just enables him in one way or another. Zenigata and Fujiko get in his way sometimes, but ultimately, they also just enable him too.
This is Fujiko we're talking about here, and that bitch would sell us out for cab fare.
You're wrong! Damn it all!
So getting the look of the characters and the body language of the characters and all of their relationships with Lupin dead on, like this movie does, as far as I'm concerned, that means it gets the characters. And even if some of them are distilled down to be a little one note, or they're kind of forced into the background for the more boring new characters like Laetitia, they shine every second they're on screen. What their little actions and expressions in this movie communicate about their relationships with each other and with Lupin is so cool, and so consistent with some of the most thoughtful characterizations of them in the franchise. Zenigata being such a nerd about Lupin's group that he knows something nobody else does about Goemon. Fujiko deliberately changing in front of Lupin to tease him. The look of love on Zenigata's face when Lupin pulls off a really dangerous and impressive move. He's like swooning. Fujiko and Zenigata are characterized really shallowly, are made the butt of jokes in some of the TV specials, but I loved how they and everyone else are handled here. Zenigata is my favorite character, and he has very little plot relevance in this movie. But the insane, over-the-top, and brutal but loving rivalry he and Lupin have is spot on. Plus the timing of the physical comedy gags with him slamming open doors over and over in this movie is so good. There are a couple of scenes in the first where the physical comedy is a little too broad and goofy for me, but overall I love how everyone moves, it's dead on, and really impressive. Yamazaki in the Blu-ray special features talks about rewatching part 1 for inspiration, which I thought was interesting because very little of this movie felt like part 1 to me, but I thought it was really cool, for example, that Zenigata's design seems to pull heavily from the manga, like his jacket material and his haircut and everything. While his nose is more like the square nose he has in part 2, and his body language is so energetic and bulldog-like and unique to this movie while still being quintessentially Zenigata. And Goemon, more than any other Goemon design I've seen, looks like the old prints and paintings of the real Japanese folk hero his character is descended from, which is a cool touch. And as has been pointed out a lot, including repeatedly by Richard Epcar on the bonus features, they really made Jigen like extra handsome in this movie for some reason. I think all 5 of the main cast has great, these are some of my favorite designs in the entire franchise. They all look really good. Speaking of, I was surprised at how horny the Letterboxd reviews were for the first. Part of the appeal of the Lupin franchise is while it's over the top and fun and largely a series of weird heist adventure stories, is that it's mostly about adults and intended for an adult audience. So cigarette brands and alcohol and sex and fashion and cars and so on are a big part of the series' tone and aesthetic.
タバコあるか？ジタンか？気に入らねえな。プラダか。俺はジバンシーからフェンディまで幅が広い。これなんだ？グリーンキース。
And while it's much goofier and less self-serious than most American TV intended for adults, it's still more mature than most shonen anime that I've watched, and I like not having to see uncomfortable fan service of 14-year-old girls, since Fujiko is a grown woman when I watch it. Part 5 in its middle schooler sex trafficking victim panty shots being one of the big exceptions. I really don't like part 5. So I think character attractiveness was a design consideration in a way it might not have been in a Pixar or DreamWorks movie. Okay, it definitely is. Yamazaki talks about Fujiko's armpits being sexy in the special features. And he, and I think Lupin voice actor Kenichi Kurita, talk about watching part 1 as kids and remembering a shower scene with Fujiko, and how the show felt very adult and taboo to them when they were young. Like, ooh, I'm not supposed to be watching this. So that's in the series' DNA. But the first is a very toned down version of the sexuality of the characters compared to most of the franchise. Whether it's the goofy sex comedy of part 2, or the avant-garde experimental exploration of sexual trauma in The Woman Called Fujiko Mine, or the shameless, unrestrained horniness of the recent Koike specials. So it's not that people were wrong to express horniness at the characters in this movie. It's just funny because the movie is so tame compared to, I would say, almost everything else. Even one of the Miyazaki directed part 2 episodes, Albatross Wings of Death, has a bunch of nudity in it. It's like hornier than this movie. And the first characters are all dressed nice, and you get one very, very quick kind of rapey implication Lupin scene, but otherwise it's very tame. Some Letterboxd reviews also talked about jiggle physics on Fujiko, and I remember seeing like anti-SJW type dorks on YouTube saying on the trailer, when the trailer dropped, oh, they better not censor Fujiko's boobs when they bring this movie to the US, which is silly for a lot of reasons. Like, of course, none of this movie was going to be censored. Again, it's very tame. And if any of it was going to be seen as offensive to an American audience, it was not going to be Fujiko fully clothed firing a machine gun. It was going to be all the Nazi stuff.
You're talking about Adolf Hitler.
Don't be ridiculous.
It's not a pro-Nazi movie by any means, but like the way Pixar would handle sexuality versus the first director talking about Fujiko's sexy underarms, Japanese culture also has a different approach to Hitler and Nazis. And part of the novelty and entertainment factor to this movie, and a lot of Lupin media, as an American viewer, is where the plot goes and how much of it conflicts with any kind of Western sense of restraint or quote-unquote good taste. Because without spoiling anything, Pixar and DreamWorks would never. I'll talk about the English dub later, but the Japanese voice cast in Lupin media is, as always, amazing. Yasuo Yamada was a legend, but I actually think Kenichi Kurita's Lupin is a little stronger and has a little more range. Koichi Yamadera, who voices Zenigata, is such an amazing and versatile voice actor. He's like one of my all-time favorite voice actors.
私はインターポールの銭形であります。逮捕だ、ルペン。くらえ、獅子方向弾。
And it's wild that Kobayashi has been voicing Jigen since the pilot in the 60s and still puts in a great performance. The new side characters are well acted too. And of course, the music is also amazing. Yuji Ono's jazz score is like one of the most important pillars of the tone and aesthetic of Lupin media. The classic like 78 theme. All the other music that he's written. I watched some of the dub of Part 4, which has a different soundtrack, and I was just like, I can't watch this. I mean, Shinichiro Watanabe did the music for the woman called Fujiko Mine. Yuji Ono had nothing to do with that. That has great music, but Part 4 using the Italian soundtrack instead of Ono's music was just like, why? Yuji Ono is a phenomenal musician who's been scoring most, though, again, not all, Lupin media since the 70s. And the new versions of the classic Lupin themes in this movie are some of my favorite versions ever. Like, this might be my favorite version of Zenigata March. This movie also uses classic Lupin songs very deliberately and appropriately. Like the scene with Samba Temperato in this movie is a really fun action sequence that is, to me, as memorable as the classic Samba Temperato escape sequence in Cagliostro. This movie kills the action set pieces in general. They're all perfectly executed and memorable and really fun and funny and make great use of the expressive character designs. I don't even want to show clips from them because you should experience them in the context of the movie, but I'm talking about a great car chase sequence, a free fall sequence with a couple characters, and a death tunnel sequence, like a vortex tunnel from a haunted house, but deadly. And then the biggest weakness of this movie, and the aspect that's kind of a downer, is the script. It's meticulously animated, and animated with so much personality, but the story is just an Indiana Jones story meets Lupin, with a blue space laser type threat out of a Marvel movie. Like, The new characters are also pretty boring. Geralt has some personality as an over-the-top villain, but NPC, Girl of the Week, Laetitia, who looks like Elsa, and her evil grandpa, Professor Lambert, are both pretty boring. Laetitia isn't the worst Lupin NPC character ever. There are lots that are way more forgettable, like Murasaki from the Fuma Conspiracy, or I don't remember her name from another page. But watching as much Lupin as I have, as quickly as I have, I really prefer characters who are as weird and intense as the main cast. Because otherwise, when they're on screen, you just wish you were watching the main cast instead. Like in Part 4, Rebecca Rossellini is Lupin's wife and is a young Paris Hilton-esque thrill-seeker hotel heiress who's bored and wants to be a thief like him. And she has her loyal butler, Robson, who's always by her side. And Part 4 also has anime Daniel Craig Nix, the MI6 agent who hulks out into a super soldier when his family is threatened. And those three are way more fun to watch and more memorable than 99% of side characters in Lupin media. And even though I don't really like Part 5 very much, I do like Yata, Zenigata's assistant, and Albert, who's kind of a rival figure to Lupin. They're also kind of more turned up. like turned up to 11 than a lot of these side characters, which makes them interesting and makes them more memorable, and you want to see more of them. And this is kind of a part 4 spoiler, not that it matters that much. In part 4, MI6 clones Leonardo da Vinci and implants da Vinci's memories into the clone, and so the main antagonist of part 4 is anime villain Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo da Vinci.
And he makes the main characters reenact The Last Supper, and it's incredible. It's so stupid and just very much in the vein of part 2, and not like anything else you're gonna watch. And compared to that, it's like Lambert is just a mean guy. He's really boring. How can you compete though with JRPG villain evil anime Leonardo da Vinci or a character like Mamo, this kind of evil sci-fi immortal being who becomes obsessed with Lupin, and who I think is based on Paul Williams in Phantom of the Paradise. I love this franchise so much. Laetitia is a good person and wants to be an archaeologist and connects with Lupin over this kind of weird, borderline uncomfortable, this profession is in my blood, hereditary destiny idea. The first is kind of a play on words, with it being the first CGI movie, but it's in reference to Lupin the First, Lupin's grandfather, who has something, to do with this diary. Now, the plot doesn't really matter that much. You can watch the movie if you care about the plot, but he's mostly just brought in for this kind of sad, nostalgic feeling. It's a little bit forced, and for Lupin to connect with Laetitia. Clarice from Cagliostro isn't a fun character, but that movie is enough of a tonal departure where she works, and she's young and naive, and that's part of her character. The first is more in line with typical Lupin in tone and characterization, and I would definitely prefer a focus on the main characters or the introduction of characters like Rebecca and Nyx, who are original and weird and interesting. Laetitia is sympathetic enough, but I watch Lupin media for adrenaline junkie characters who are deep down pretty unwell and weird, getting into insane situations. Not her mean grandpa doesn't want to let her go to Boston University to study archaeology. I also don't like the grandpa's design, especially contrasted with hers. She's this angelic, Elsa-looking doll, and he's made to look unattractive in a very lazy, villains are ugly, heroes are cute way. So both his characterization and his design are boring. At least Geralt is dialed up to 11 in the way Lupin characters should be. And again, I don't want to spoil anything, but you look at this guy, you know Nazis are in this movie, and then this character is introduced. It's like, oh, I wonder if this guy is a crazy Nazi. I guess we'll see. As far as the English dub, I'm a huge fan of the Part 2 dub, and most of that cast is here except for Dan Lorget, who used to play Zenigata and I guess retired a long time ago. They bring him up on the special features bit in a way that's just kind of weird and baffling. That doesn't really give any kind of indication as to why he was replaced. I was not a big fan of Doug Erholtz as Zenigata in the couple of episodes of Part 4 and 5 I saw him in, but watching this movie, I've really come around to him. His approach is more of a nasally noir guy, but in this, he's great at the crazy Zenigata screaming moments.
Whoa, that was good for an old guy.
You ready to surrender yet?
And what more can you ask for? The three main new actors also do a fantastic job, and Oliver, Lang, Epcar, and Ruff are as great as always, especially Oliver. But overall, the dub for this movie is really awkward. Not in the performances. This cast has some of my favorite voice actors ever, and people who are inspirational to me as someone who is doing more voice work now and trying to get better at it. But in the script, it's very awkward. Erholtz is giving it his all, but so many lines he's reading as Zenigata are just expository and seem like very direct translations of the Japanese script, to where they sound unnatural in English, and don't have very much personality to them. Grandpa Lambert also has some lines that are just bad, like laughably bad and awkward. Here's one of them. I got rid of the visuals to avoid spoilers, but listen to this.
You've just witnessed with your very own eyes the power that I've seized, and yet I'm the one you're accusing of being a fake? How dare you? How dare you!
Even if his lines are appropriate translations, they should have been changed to sound more natural in English, because it's like Speed Racer villain level dubbing in 2020. I didn't get that feeling with Tony Oliver as Lupin, but maybe they spent more time on his lines or gave him a little more freedom to improvise. I don't know. The direction for some of the dub reading seems bad in some places, and the dub also sucks the air out of one of my favorite dialogue and character interaction gags in the movie, where Fujiko asks Lupin for a meteorite. Here are both versions.
隕石？隕石のことじゃない？ルパン、隕石出して。
あいよ、隕石ね。っておい、すごいよ、そんなもんあるかよ。
あら、いつも役に立たないものいろいろ持ってるじゃない。
Meteorites? They're meteorites, aren't they? Lupin, hand one over.
Sure, got one right here. Yeah, you think I carry one around with me?
Of course. I thought you always had some useless knickknacks on you.
This dub was maybe just kind of doomed from the beginning to be uncanny and awkward, since it's impossible to match CGI animated mouth movements, and the dialogue for this movie was even pre-recorded. And the original mouth movements were based on those Japanese pre-recordings. So they're very, very specific mouth movements that they're trying to match. And I'm sure recording during a pandemic didn't help. The dub is worth checking out if you're a franchise fan. There were still some lines and some moments I really liked, and I would have even if I had heard it was bad, I would have watched it for the novelty and out of curiosity. And I'm glad it exists for accessibility reasons. But if you have a choice, then I would recommend watching the Japanese version. And I say that as someone who loves the manga entertainment dub of Cagliostro and the Jigen dub of Part 2 and Mamo. The latter two, again, almost using this exact same cast. The dub just doesn't work as well here, both because of the unavoidable CGI weirdness and because the script is really lacking. People complain about Part 2 and that Mamo dub changing too much, but if you're changing it in a way that feels natural and that is entertaining, I think that works a lot better than just a literal interpretation. That is not the way human beings speak. I think with a better script with more natural dialogue, or even just less blunt expository dialogue, and some better direction, the dub would have worked much better. The plot of this movie is very derivative, but the commitment to making these characters pop and the commitment to doing them service in CGI is commendable. I'm a big fan of both Cagliostro and Mamo. Mamo is a very adult, bizarre sci-fi movie about identity.
Why, you son of a bitch! I know who the hell I am!
And with more of a focus on interpersonal conflicts within Lupin's gang. Cagliostro is a beautiful, sweet movie about doing right by other people. And the first doesn't hold up to them story-wise. But I'd still consider it up there on my, like, S-tier Lupin movie ranking. I'd say those three films and Goemon's Bloodspray are the best Lupin films I've seen. Bloodspray has a much more interesting villain than the first, so does Mamo. And Mamo and Cagliostro just have better scripts, more complex and layered stories with subtext. And all three have better dub options. But the first animation is so strong that I still love it and have to recommend it. The first has a lot of little Cagliostro references, which is kind of dangerous to invite comparison to one of the best animated films ever made. Good luck not falling short, but to be fair, it's all done with love and deference. If you've never seen any Lupin stuff, I would recommend watching probably Cagliostro and Albatross first, as long as you go in knowing that Cagliostro is a lot softer and sweeter, and see if you like those. And then check out Goemon's Bloodspray and Mamo and the first. Like, make an afternoon of it if you can, because you kind of get to hit on all the different stylistic and tonal variations in the series with some of the best stuff in the series, and see if you don't like any of it, you don't like it. I don't know if you should start with the first just because, like I said, the script is so weak. But if you're a fan, then absolutely, there is no reason not to watch this movie. It feels like a miracle that this movie exists and that the characters are represented the way that they are. It's like, what a time to be alive. I haven't seen the newer live-action Lupin movie, but I heard it was really bad, and I used to be really frustrated that a solid modern live-action adaptation of Lupin doesn't exist. The main actor in the Zenigata live-action series, Ryohei Suzuki, is incredible. He nails the impossible balance of playing a live-action cartoon character without being too much or grating. And he like embodies Zenigata so well. But what I've seen of the show, the writing and production design aren't great, and I didn't really like the show overall, so it doesn't seem that good either outside of his amazing performance. You'd have to find a cast of people capable of doing that, and then give them a script that played to the strengths of that kind of over-the-top tone. After seeing the first, my take is now kind of, why bother making live-action Lupin when this exists? Part of the appeal of Lupin is the characters are all superhuman. They have superhuman desires and superhuman abilities. Why not just keep making these great-looking CGI movies that can express their personalities in a way that isn't impossible, but would be a lot more difficult with living, breathing actors? I don't think CGI is superior to human acting or anything creepy like that, but when you have characters that are kind of hyper-real, that have a solid emotional grounding and realistic relationships with each other, but are also insane, superhuman adrenaline junkies. Unless a studio will one day be willing to commit the money and resources to making that a reality in live action, and without making all the characters white, this seems like the way to go. I'll link the opening title sequence to this movie in the description. Just the opening sequence blows me away. It's like 1.5 minutes, and it's gorgeous, and it has little references to other Lupin media. And it also introduces and summarizes every single series main character and their place in the group, to where if you've never seen them before, you already sort of get who they are in 1.5 minutes and with no dialogue. Like the rest of this movie, incredible visual storytelling. I love it. Give me more of these movies, please. Just with a better script and weirder side characters. You can criticize Mamo, it's too rapey and the pacing is very uneven, but I don't think anybody ever watched Mystery of Mamo and said, oh, I wish this was weirder, I wish this took more risks, I wish Mamo was a little weirder and more original as a villain, because that movie is something else.
And whichever one it is, you'll only be in my way!
I wasn't upset that the first wasn't more adult. I don't think violence or sexual content are necessary for a good Lupin story, even though I like the darker stuff a lot. And again, it goes places an American CGI movie would never go, but I would like to see something less derivative of boring Hollywood movie plots and see characters more like a Rebecca than Letitia. I feel like I was very hard on this movie. I love this movie. This is probably my favorite movie of the year, but I'm very biased because I like this franchise so much. I've been a Lupin fan probably since middle school, and I'm around 30 now, but this year is the first time I'm really going back and watching, or trying to watch basically everything. Like I'd seen a lot of part 2, Mamo, Cagliostro, maybe a couple other movies, and Strange Psychokinetic Strategy, but this year is when I watched part 1, 4, 5, starting to watch part 3, watching more part 2, watching, you know, the one called Fujiko Mine and all the Koike stuff, and this is among the best of it, and it's obviously done with a lot of love, but you know, you can watch Alcatraz Connection, which has like evil Columbo and is about Lupin wanting to have sex with a college student who's writing her thesis on the JFK assassination, so he uncovers the truth behind the JFK assassination, and it has to do with like a secret city underneath Alcatraz. It's not a good movie. The animation's pretty bad. Fujiko's characterized very poorly in that. But watching that with a group of friends is incredible. That was so much fun. That movie is so disrespectful towards American culture and American history. It's amazing. It's also got a bunch of Blues Brothers references for some reason. And there are some moments in the first that are like that, where it's really fun to watch with other people because you get to see big reactions, but there are other parts where it's like, oh, there's a blue space laser doomsday machine thing, or there's sad Letitia with her grandfather scenes that just, I've rewatched it a few times, but sometimes I just sort of rewatch the main character moments and action set pieces. Whereas if I sit down and watch Cagliostro or Mamo, I'm watching the full movie, or Goemon's Bloodspray. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thanks.